Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Welcome, everybody, to what can only be described as a very special episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. I'm your host, Joe Slepsky. And for you newcomers, this is the show where we cover all the episodes of the cartoon. We're also working our way through the comic book. We're up to Real American Hero. We're near the end as of this recording. But I've got a really special surprise for you listeners today. It is something that came across my inbox kind of surreptitiously. I was told that it was an ultra hush top secret thing that that's kind of been under wraps. Many of you may have listened to a previous episode of Joe on Joe called G.I. Columbo. And if you were a close listener of that, first of all, thank you for listening. If you were a close listener of that, there were, if you've never listened to it, what that was a secret lost recording of a crossover animated episode that was recorded but never produced by the powers that be. So they had done all the legwork to get all the voices down on track, and they never sent it for animation. And that file found its way to me surreptitiously and mysteriously. And I was able to share that with you guys, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Well, if you paid close attention during that episode, there were a couple instances where the roll call happened, and they were running down the list of all the attendant G.I. Joe members. And if something stood out, if you were paying close attention, is that there were 2 G.I. Joe members that were missing during the adventures of G.I. Columbo. Well, what came across in my inbox today, not today, I've been sitting on this for a little bit. What came across in my inbox was the secret crossover that Marvel Comics had planned to do with the animated series. When the idea for G.I. Columbo first came across, apparently Jim Shooter over at Marvel Comics was a massive Peter Falk Columbo fan. And he was like, he put the word down. Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief, he said, hey, let's get in this Columbo game. Let's do a crossover with that episode. And according to the reports that I've been given, everyone was on board. And so Larry Hama wrote a special one-shot issue of G.I. Joe Real American Hero that they thought, hey, let's go out and get a murderer's row of artists to draw it. So let's put the word out, and we'll say, who doesn't love a nice Columbo crossover? And who would like to participate in this one-shot comic with G.I. Joe? And I'm telling you guys, artists came out of the woodworks. According to my secret source, no one turned them down. In fact, people were clamoring to work on this one-shot G.I. Joe. So Larry brought his A game, and he produced an issue that became so expensive and so full of top talent. And I'm going to tease out some of the talent that we're going to get in this book, but I'm not going to tell you everyone. But I'm talking Joe Kubert, Neil Adams. Have you ever wanted to see John Byrne do a page in G.I. Joe? You do in this issue. What about Frank Miller? What if Steve Ditko drew G.I. Joe? What would that look like? It's in my hands. I have the lost one-shot that was the spin-off tie-in to Columbo that was so expensive for Marvel Comics to produce, they couldn't afford to publish it. Marvel Comics contracted the top players in the game, and it became so expensive they had to shelve it in order to recoup because it was too expensive to actually put into production. They're, especially at the time, they would have had to charge $20 an issue in order for them to break even. So after this comic book was created, it was inked. Now, it was not colored. I don't have colored. And you're going to learn real quick why it wasn't lettered. They shelved it. They put it in a drawer, and they swore everyone to secrecy. And when we revealed our episode of Columbo to the world, a certain ex-employee of Marvel Comics reached out to me and said, "Here, you need to know the full story. What really happened when Timber and Freedom, why were they not there for Columbo's roll call?" That is right, guys. I have an all Timber, all Freedom, silent issue in my hands. Larry Hama wrote another silent issue of G.I. Joe, just the adventures of Timber and Freedom that took place during the roll call of G.I. Columbo. Where were they? What were they up to? What was so important that didn't have them at the pit that day? It is in my hands. I also have, because it's not just the interiors that I have in my hands, I have the cover. Consider that a tease as you head on over to our social media accounts at Joe on Joe Pod. That's for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Or you could send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you thought of G.I. Columbo. Or, you know, after this is over and you've listened to this lost issue of G.I. Joe, let me know what you think. And you know what? Also, while you're out there following various social things and rating and reviewing, that always helps. We also have a Patreon over at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod. If you want to help support the show, that is always completely welcome and helps us do fun things like this. And when I say do fun things like this, I mean pay off secret tipsters and undercover agents to steal these beauties like today's comic book or last month's G.I. Columbo. These real world artifacts that we're digging up for you. But I also want you to visit our friends over at the Movies in a Meal podcast. They do fabulous work when it comes to movies and meals too. But really, their focus is on movies. Like the meal is, I feel like you came for the meal and you stayed for the movie is kind of the thing. Like the meal part of the Movies in a Meal kind of hooks you in. Like we're all going to be eating, we're going to be noshing, we're going to be relaxed, but you're really there to talk about the movie. And so, like, I just saw Bullet Train. They're talking about Bullet Train. First of all, fabulous. You love it. But also, new stuff. They also cover TV shows. So there's a lot going on over at the Movies in a Meal podcast. So please, 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 they're wonderful sponsors and give them a look. So now, I teased you about how fabulous the cover is. Now, who do you think could do the cover art? What 1980s, mid to late 80s, seminal work that reshaped a generation, redefined the language of comic books. You're thinking, maybe Dark Knight, right? Like maybe like it's like a Lightning Strike cover. That'd be good. That'd be very cool. I have a Lightning Strike cover version of Snake Eyes that someone did. I bought it at a Comic-Con, which is really cool. But that's not it, though. That's not it. You're talking, Dark Knight, Lightning Strike. That's not it. You're thinking, what could it be? Could it be Walter Simonson breaking through like Beta Ray Bill, like it was something like that? No. It is Dave Gibbons drew the cover for this comic book, guys. The Dave Gibbons drew the cover for this comic. That alone probably priced this project out of production, but he did it. Turns out Dave Gibbons, massive G.I. Joe fan. In keeping with Watchmen, he kind of played off that theme. So if you guys have ever seen the Watchmen covers, you know that there's a stylistic theme that runs through all of them. Close-ups on something, and there's either like blood or raindrops or, clocks ticking or like circular patterns. There's a real rhythm to the Watchmen covers, right? Obviously with the smiley face thing going on in there too, on most of them, or the impression of the smiley face. So Dave Gibbons took that and he ran with it. And so to give you a little hint as to what you're in store for inside, it's got the G.I. Joe logo, Now this time, instead of running above the logo, it does run on the side like Watchmen. So Watchmen, the word Watchmen ran on the left side of the page, W at the bottom, the men, the N and the M all the way up at the top left. And that's how this is set up. So G.I. Joe runs alongside the page. It's really, really cool. And the close-up is like a dog collar, or in this case, a wolf collar, because there's a tag on it, and it's a dog tag, like a G.I. Joe issue kind of dog tag, hanging off the collar, and it says Timber. And then there's an eagle feather that has fallen across the dog collar, possibly where you would maybe put a smile on a smiley face, and it kind of it sits a little bit skewed to the right, so it's mostly covers the collar when it crosses the right hand side. It doesn't cross over the threshold of the left, so it's a little cockeyed with the quill, I guess the pen part of it. So the feathers heading to the right, and the sharp pen part that you would use if you were writing with it, that's pointing to the left. So it makes this smile face. The dog tag part with Timber kind of sits where his, if it were a smiley face, his left eye would be. So if you're looking at the page, it'd be on the right side of the page. And then where the right eye would be, it's drops of blood. Very much a la The Watchmen. It's really, really cool. The backdrop of it is kind of concrete. You could see the, I don't know, what do you call that, between like two pieces of concrete where you lay the stone and then there's a little gutter of concrete there. So like you could see that breaking up the stone. So I guess it's sitting on stone, not concrete, I guess. So it's stone, concrete. So it's like on the ground, and there's a little drop of blood with Timber and then an eagle feather there. If that's not telling you what you're in for, I loved it. When I saw this, I about plotzed when I saw this. Like this is fabulous. And it's all sitting a little cockeyed. It's not like straight on or anything. It's a little cockeyed. It looks so good. So Dave Gibbons kicks this party off with a Watchmen style cover for G.I. Joe. I'm in.
Yo, Joe!
And so we're going to dig in to this silent issue circa there. We think it would have been published circa 1987, probably for a 1988 release. But we'll never really know, will we? But I present to you a Joe on Joe exclusive edition of G.I. Joe Silent in the Zoo.
Yo, Joe!
The first page, if you think about comic book history and you think about who's the Mount Rushmores, who are the people that defined what comic book language was, how they looked, how superhero language evolved, there are probably two names that come to mind immediately that are neck and neck. There's only one man that beat the king to the punch, and that's Will Eisner, everybody. And the Silent in the Zoo issue of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, opens with a Will Eisner splash page. Now, you all know Will Eisner as the creator of The Spirit, one of the pulp heroes from back in the day. He also did a lot of military instructions, so he was comfortable drawing military gear. He also ran studios for a long time, and he did a few pieces that are kind of collected under a contract with God collection, Dropsy Avenue, things like that. A real slice of life stuff, but Eisner is the ground that he broke, that he really brings to this table for this splash page, is the way that he introduced the idea of incorporating the story title into the environment and making the environment come to life, both with the richness of his pencil, but also literally the design sense. And he doesn't fake the funk here either. So the splash page is it's the opening of a zoo, the opening, like, front gates of a zoo, right? So picture that. You got the gated thing. It says the zoo on top, but it actually says silent along the brick columns that's running up the side are worked into this intricate lattice of metalwork. And then the zoo, which is like you look at a traditional zoo, it's got the rainbow kind of arch and it says, like zoo. That's the zoo for Silent in the Zoo, which Eisner incorporated into it. It's really, really great. Really, really smart. And it opens with just that. So these gates they're open outwards. There's a lot of people filing out. You also see some people, a few people in park employee badges. There's a sign there that says park open from 6 to, or what does it say? It says 6 to 9. Oh, I'm sorry. It says 9 to 7 p.m. So everyone's filing out. So that gives the feel that it looks like everything's closing for the day, right? You don't see anyone actually going into the zoo. There's a curb. There's a taxi cab, and this is what I really love about this whole book, because there's a lot of this in it. In the taxi cab, it's actually being driven by Ebony White from the Spirit strip of his, and in it, to be fair, it's not drawn super crazy racist like it used to. It was an updated version of Ebony. And the Spirit himself, the Spirit is in an issue of G.I. Joe. If you're a Spirit fan like I am, it's really wild to see the Spirit sitting in the back seat of this taxi cab. It's one of those like Easter eggs that a lot of artists like to put in comic books. And it's not the only one in this book. It's so fun. So the Spirit is in a taxi cab with Ebony, and they're kind of driving through the corner of this. You do have the credits are below, and it says, it's written by Larry Hama. And it says pencils by, the credit that it gives is Krusty Bunkers. Now that is a group of artists that worked together mostly out of like Neil Adams' studio and the stuff in the 70s, and that Larry was a part of. So they couldn't fit everyone's credit name in the credit box. So they just went with Larry, decided to go with Krusty Bunkers, which is awesome. But each page has its own credit listed, so who drew it. So that's kind of cool. And colors are by George Russos, letters by Joe Rosen. And this would have been the era that Bob Harris and Bobby Chase were the editorial staff for this. So this is a super lush, rich, Will Eisner-esque opening. We're at the City Zoo. We don't exactly know what city. But if you look in the corner of it, kind of like off center a little bit, in the bushes, Timber is hiding. So Snake Eyes is Timber. And in the sky above it, Freedom, Spirit's eagle friend, Freedom, he's kind of flying overhead, surveying the scene. So that's kind of the opening. That's where this is all taking place at. So this is Will Eisner drawing G.I. Joe, and I couldn't be happier.
Yo, Joe!
So page 2, ladies and gentlemen, enter Curt Swann. That's right, the Curt Swann, the legendary Superman artist Curt Swann, inked by Murphy Anderson. We have the Swanderson duo working on a page of G.I. Joe, and it is dynamite. Here's what I love about this whole page in general. Curt Swann was known for making the comic page look so normal and so real. So he would draw fantastical stuff, but his characters, especially Superman, and it worked really well for Superman. There's some characters I've seen him, there's some books I've seen him work on that it needed a little more of a fantastic flair to it, right? But he created this world of Superman that was so, I'm going to use the word pedestrian, but I don't mean that in a bad way. Because it was grounded. It was just this, Metropolis was a real world with real people who wore real suit coats and real pants, and they wrinkled in the real way, and they sat right, and like everything was actually authentic about it. So when Superman would do something fantastical and crazy, it would stand out even more, right? The normal people weren't in exaggerated poses or overly dramatic, because the craziness of a Swan page was enough, just having Superman or the villain, the villain of the Zartox or Vartox, Vartox, or Terra Man, things like that. Those crazy villains of the 70s. Swan's stuff was so iconic. Next to Garcia Lopez, his would be used on so many of the marketing materials for Superman. So if you're not familiar with Curt Swann, he's just amazing, and he was often paired with Murphy Anderson. So they had Swanderson was the duo And they're just dynamite. And it's perfect for this page. So the first panel, we're in the interior of the zoo, and we have Timber leaping over the wall into the zoo. So it's kind of like a reverse prison break. That's the vibe I'm getting here. Timber's breaking into the zoo. And in this same shot, you see this, you see Freedom rather, flying overhead, right? So immediately we're set up with, and again, it's all silent. So we just have to go with what the action on the page is, that they're breaking into jail, so to speak, right? Next panel, Timber, he's hiding in the bushes, and we see some more civilians filing out the front gate, right? So they're kind of both chilling. Like Timber's kind of hard to see. You got a lot of shadow over him. He's really literally in the bushes. And this is what's awesome. All the people that are filing out, you see Clark Kent, you see Lois Lane. I think there's a Perry White. I think that's the back of Jimmy Olsen's head that I'm looking at. So it's fun. Like it's fun. There's not a ton of civilians in there, but they all look amazingly real. It's crazy. So the next one is kind of the next panel is kind of a, expositional page. So Freedom, he's flying overhead, and there's like it's a clock tower, and you see that it's 7:00, right? So as we saw on the first page, that Eisner page, park's closing, just drilling home the fact that everyone's leaving. Part of the people that were filing out, they were also wearing some zoo clothes. If you look back, you see it. There's people in like these zoo overalls and jumpsuits, which is quite frankly, Swann does a great jumpsuit and overall. If you've, again, never read the Superman books, you'll know what I'm talking about. So it's telling us, the viewer, after hours, our friends Timber and Freedom don't have to worry about, getting caught. Another staple of Superman comics, which is actually reflected in the movies, is like hot dog stands and New York, street corner hot dogs. Like that was just drilled home, and it's in like all the Superman movies. It's really quite funny. Timber is now rooting through not abandoned, but closed for the night hot dog stand, and he's trying to get at some hot dogs, right? Which is pretty funny because I like when Timber, and you'll see throughout this whole thing, Timber is he's Timber. He's a timber wolf. If you've ever seen a timber wolf, they're big, they're mean, like looking, but they're the one that I met some timber wolves who were super sweet, but they can be vicious. But they look fierce. You guys have all seen the action figures, right? But he's portrayed like a sweet dog in most of this issue until he's not. So that's really cool. So Timber's sneaking a hot dog, and then in this final panel, he just has he has Freedom, like, you can only say screaming. There's no sound effects here. There are a few sound effects as we go throughout it, but in this case, it's just all drawn there. It's not actually a sound effect. Freedom is screaming at Timber, and Timber is kind of sheepishly kind of slinking away from this thing. And in the deep background, this is important, you can actually see the front gate being closed. So now in the 2 pages, we've kind of wrapped up. You can imagine this whole sequence took about 30 minutes for everyone to file out of the zoo and all that stuff. So that's Kurt Swann page. It's fabulous.
Yo, Joe!
I was gonna get excited for this page when I heard that he was drawing this book, especially the era. This is circa 87, 88. What was happening in this era? The Legion of Superheroes, the 5-year gap was about to drop. What was Keith Giffen playing with in Legion? 9-panel grids. Guys, we have a Keith Giffen 9-panel grid with Al Gordon inks in an issue of G.I. Joe. I am so excited. So what is awesome about this whole page is Keith really lines it up. He really takes the time to set this up. There's a beautiful symmetry to this. So picture the 9-panel grid, right? 3 across, 3 down. All the panels on the left side, so panel be 1, 4, 7, those all have Freedom in it. The building, the panels in the middle, so it would be 2, 5, and 8. They all have this building that these guys are approaching, right? And then all the panels on the right side, which would be 3, 6, and 9, they all feature Timber as the focus of it. So as a page, it just works so well. And then you've got the real heavy inks by Al Gordon. It's really, really cool. So the first panel, we see Freedom. He's flying towards this building, and in the distance, it's kind of an over the shoulder on Freedom, but in the distance, there's a circle of birds, and they're overhead. They're flying overhead this building, and the building's got a lot of kind of overgrowth on it. It looks a little dormant, like it's been abandoned a little bit, but no lights around and things like that. So it's like the birds are calling freedom. So that's kind of, I think the way I'm reading is that's what they're doing here. All these birds saw what was up, and they kind of put out word to Freedom, and Freedom's like, "What's up, Tim? We got to go check this out." That's the vibe I get from this panel. Second panel is kind of a skewed logo. If you've ever seen a lot of the Giffin 9-panel stuff, is he doesn't just do something head on, right? Because that would be boring. He really zooms in, and if it's a picture right now, I got in front of me a can of Coke or can of water, and instead of just drawing that whole can, like he would zoom in, and he would draw enough of it so you could absolutely tell that it's a can, and that would be the focus of the panel, but that it would be off kilter, and maybe only 1/4 of the can was drawn, and that's kind of what he does here. So it's this real crooked view of this building, and there's a logo, and there's all these vines growing over it. However, on the right side, you see in big red and blue letters, you see a C and an O, and good storytelling to kind of ground us in place. You see overhead, and because he tilts that angle a little bit, you see overhead, you see these birds that are drawn in the distance. So whatever Timber was looking at, whatever Freedom was looking at, these birds, this is the building the birds are flying over. Third panel, it's just a close up of Timber barking. So it's and I think this is Giffin's establishing communication between, that they're all chit chatting. Fourth panel, Freedom is now using his big old eagle claws, and he's tearing away, he's in the process tearing away all these vines that were covering up that logo. Fifth panel, so right in the middle, and this is what's so great, right in the middle of the page is the logo of the building, guys. Arbco Reptile House. Right in the middle. Now, we got Broca Beach. I think there was Barco Circus, or maybe it was even Arbco Circus, Arco, Barco, Broca. It's Cobra, and it's in red and blue, and it's the Reptile House. So it's Arbco Reptile House that Timber has now ripped off and revealed right in the center of this page. It looks so good. It's awesome. Sixth panel, you see Timber react to that. So now, previously Timber was like kind of going face forward. He's like back on his haunches. You know how a dog will do that? They'll put their paws out, and their haunches will go up, and they'll kind of get real low with their head, and put their butt up in the air. That's what Timber's doing here, because even he recognizes he's no dummy. This is a Cobra front. Seventh panel, Freedom is flying above that. You see the tip of the Arbco sign, and Freedom is like yelling at him. I get the feeling he's actually being like, "You stop being a chicken, let's go." Eighth panel is it makes me think of like a haunted house, because it's that camera. Think about that camera where it's like real low to the ground, like a worm's eye view, and it's looking up. There's 2 steps here to get up into this, 2 or 3 steps, 3 steps, yeah, to get up into this house, and they're walking into this black door, right? So you see them fully, and you see them from behind, and Timber's walking in, and his tail's wagging, and Freedom is like kind of hovering above him. So they're like walking, and the door's on a tilt, so there's an angle to these big open doors. So it's like they're walking into a haunted house. The final panel of the page, it's pretty much the same shot as the previous panel. In fact, if you look closely, it looks like he just Xeroxed it to save time, which I'm 100% for. But now they're further in, and you just see a faint wisp outline. Pretty much the blackness has consumed them, you know what I mean? So they've moved into the darkness. And you just see a little bit of his wagging tail and a couple feathers flipping out from the right and the left from where Freedom is. So that's it. I mean, it's a Keith Giffen 9-panel grid. I'm so excited for that.
Yo, Joe!
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, he may have been reclusive, but I'm telling you right now, he was still doing comic books all the way up to the end. He didn't want to do any Spider-Man, but when they asked Steve Ditko to draw a page of G.I. Joe, apparently Ditko was on board with it, guys. It's awesome to see Steve Ditko doing G.I. Joe. Now, this is before, I think this is before Speedball. He was still doing stuff. He was doing like Machine Man and stuff at the time. And he was still working for Marvel. He just wouldn't work on Spider-Man. If you've never looked up or learned anything about Ditko, I urge you to. He's fascinating. He's a fascinating character. Someone who absolutely stuck to his beliefs and so on and so forth. Wildly so. But a brilliant cartoonist. That's how I would describe him. A brilliant cartoonist. There are some artists who I like to think of as like draftsmen, people like Neil Adams and, who really make a scene. I feel like Ditko, and he'd probably want to punch me if he ever heard any of this. I feel like Ditko was a cartoonist working in a comic book medium. And I say that with love because his stuff was just so wild and so out there that it just doesn't feel constrained to any real, universe. You know what I mean? Which is why his Doctor Strange is so great, right? Because that's what Doctor Strange would do. He would just be in other universes and other dimensions, and all the designs and stuff would be absolutely wild. So we get some of that in this. So Timber and Freedom, they're now in the reptile. So picture Reptile House, right? Where it's, I'm calling them cages, but what do you call those things? It's like, they're set they're behind the glass. They're in their little cell. It's like a jail cell, but it's like that kind of thing. So there's the clear glass in the front of the reptile cages, and there's snakes and lizards, and it's a normal kind of side shot of those two walking and flapping, hovering, I guess we'd call it. They're walking past some normal snakes and lizards. But then Ditko has them turning this, when they kind of turn a corner in this reptile house, all of a sudden these lizards and snakes start looking. Have you guys ever seen Ditko's Shade? That's right. Sorry, I had to look that up real quick. Yeah, Shade the Changing Man. How he had a morphogenic field around him or something like that. That was kind of the deal. They did a version in Vertigo, which kind of it. I think that Vertigo version was a little more popular, and I believe they took the field away and just kind of made it him. Like his body was this weird expressionistic painting version. But I believe in the Ditko version, it was like this field that would embody him. There's a character in the X-Men right now that is very similar to this. It's this young girl who's a mutant and her body keeps twisting reality. And it's totally a ripoff. I would most likely consider it an homage. I'm sure they're aware of what they're doing to Shade and Ditko. The character's in New Mutants and has like a weird football-shaped head. I don't remember her name. But so this is kind of that. So there's these, in this second panel, there's all these snakes and lizards, but they're starting to look real Ditko-y, right? So they've got big eyes and there's one of them that has like two tails when they shouldn't have two tails. There's that lizard doesn't look that way. There's an extra leg on another one, right? In the third panel, he actually moves past Freedom and Timber and he just takes the time to draw these creatures. And, they're wild. So there's forked tongues with giant, one eye is giant, not both. So the one eye is giant. The other eye is normal sized. There's one lizard he draws that has like a scaly right side, but the other side actually looks like he's kind of human. Third panel are these close-ups of making sure that we see there's a lot of mutations in here. And then there's a fourth panel where these animals now, there's one of them has attacked the glass. It's just completely going after Timber and Freedom. So it's setting up that these animals aren't just docile sitting in their experiments. They're angry. They're not being treated well. It's ramping up the tension. And then the fifth panel, his page ends with Freedom and Timber. It's funny. We're imbuing human characteristics, but you kind of have to. Otherwise, how do you tell a Homeward Bound kind of story without imbuing human characteristics? So Freedom and Timber share a glance of a WTF. What are we even looking at?
Yo, Joe!
All right. This is a jarring shift from this crazy Ditko surreal science fiction kind of reality stuff to this next page, but I'm here for it. I don't think it's as crazy as it sounds at first glance. Jim Sturranko, everybody. Jim Sturranko draws the 5th page of Silent in the Zoo. Now, if you know Jim Sturranko, wild man, literally was a magician, was an escape artist, fine artist, like the definition of a fine artist. Very outspoken, even today on Twitter. He's in the 60s, he broke ground with Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. He also did some X-Men work. He was one of the first guys to really kind of play with perspective a lot more than most. Where we talk about how like Eisner would put the camera in different places and would really add life to the lifeless. Sturranko would like put that camera even further and add like a fisheye life to it. His sense of design was stellar. Look up Sturranko S.H.I.E.L.D. covers. You'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see that all of his S.H.I.E.L.D. covers were ripped off, or have an homage. I don't mean necessarily ripped off. They're so famous, it's hard to actually rip them off. Like it's really, really fabulous. So we got Sturranko doing this. And he was known for his secret agent stuff. So there's this first panel is this like Batman kind of Dutch tilt perspective. And there's a big sign up that says labs on it, right? So it just, like laboratory, but it just says labs. And that's probably because there's not a lot of space in this panel to actually fit the word laboratory in just the way that he drew it. But the animals are, they're there. And it's got one of those door handles that are like not round, like a knob. It's more of like a latch, like you would press down on it and it would open. Which comes in handy. This is one of those storytelling things of like, you know what, you got to get them through the door. So make it, let's not make it impossible for them. So there's an insert panel of Freedom putting his claws on this door handle and door handle bending down. So we're opening the door. And now this middle panel is awesome. It's like a James Bond death trap hallway. There's lasers, there's flames, there's all kinds of booby traps in this hallway that these animals are at one end, and at the other, like we're kind of over their shoulder, and at the other end of this hallway is the next door to get to, right? So that's the lab door, I guess, that's beyond this. So if you're not punching the code in, you have to navigate this death trap. It's pretty great. And what's awesome is he accomplishes it in just 2 panels. The bottom of the page, so picture this, the bottom of the page, 2 panels, base, even size. On the left hand, it's Timber, and on the right hand, it's Freedom. And he has Timber leaping through like fire blasts, right? So there's fire blasts. There's one coming from the floor, from the wall. Looks like something's jetting down from the top. And he has Timber like kind of leaping, like leaping through it. Think of the Danger Room. And that's the whole vibe I get from this whole sequence. This is like the Danger Room in the X-Men back in the day. And on the right side, you have Freedom. He's doing the same thing, but he's like flying like the Angel in X-Men through a bunch of lasers. So my vibe here is that Sturranko was channeling that X-Men Danger Room thing. And we just get these 2 panels of both of them. And it's cool because they're going at, if you're looking at the page, God, I wish I could share this with you guys, but I will get sued to high heaven if I share this. So if you're looking at the page, it's like if you're in the middle of the page, they're both going to the left and to the right, like kind of they're going to go around you. It's really, really great. I love it. Yo, Joe! So now when you think of laboratories, the thing that I think of, giant machines, I think of wild beakers filled with liquids and electricity humming and blah, 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 blah. And who else draws that better than Jack the King Kirby? Are you kidding me? If you don't know who Jack Kirby is, turn this off now and go read a book. Kirby's dynamite. Kirby is amazing. Kirby had stopped working for Marvel at the time. Kirby was working, he had done DC's superpower stuff in the early 80s and mid 80s, like through like 86, 85, 86. This would have been an era where he started working on his Secret City saga. For him to come back and do a page for Marvel, I think that what I'm reading is that Kirby was a diehard G.I. Joe fan. That's the way I read this. That Kirby must have, or he had a lot of grandchildren, right? Or he had multiple grandchildren. I think he did. Yeah, I know I met one or two of them. It might have been that maybe his grandchildren were huge fans, and they were like, "Grandpa, you got it. They want you to draw G.I. Joe. Oh my God, you got to draw G.I. Joe." So we get a page of Kirby G.I. Joe. Now Kirby was a lot of his like Thor stuff, some of his bigger stuff was like 4 panels. Like he'll just do 4 big panels on a page. He was also really prolific. He probably drew this whole thing in like 2 hours, and it's still better than anything you or I will ever do. So there's 4 panels on this page, and the first panel is our heroes, Freedom and Timber. They're kind of skidding into this lab after these lasers, right? And they're you actually see Timber's fur is kind of smoking. He draws a couple smoke lines off it, so that's cool. So they come skidding in, and behind them, the wall of like computers that you see in this lab, it's totally straight out of Fantastic Four. It's all that Kirby, that Kirby style science fiction stuff, computers, and there's not a ton of Kirby crackle. Actually, is there on this page? Yeah, there's a little bit. There's a little bit of Kirby crackle. But like it's this big giant machinery. Remember like all the machinery he would have Ben Grimm lift over his head in Fantastic Four. That's what's drawn behind them in this panel. Second panel, you see what they're looking at, and it's an operating table. And guys, if you've ever wanted to see Jack Kirby draw Dr. Mindbender, you're welcome, because that's what you get. Jack Kirby drawing shirtless Dr. Mindbender standing over a table. Now it's a dissection table, and it's like an experiment table. Remember Kirby did Commandi, he did like 2001. He did a lot of that like post-Earth sentient animal stuff. So that's cool. I like that they gave him this page, because it's got a little bit of that. It's got a little bit of that future dissection. I'm thinking of books like OMAC, right? And there's this, unfortunately, I think the bird's dead. There's a dead eagle on it, but he's all flayed out, like he's being dissected, worked on by Dr. Mindbender. And then there's also a couple of Cobra Troopers. And I remember Kirby, you think troopers, you think like Hydra agents, like that kind of style. That's what they look like. It's awesome. Kirby drawing Cobra Troopers with a shirtless Mindbender. And he's got a scalpel in one hand, and he's kind of giving a look like he got caught with his finger in the cookie jar. Kirby does what you don't see him do a lot of it, but it's a close-up on Mindbender's face. And actually Kirby did do a dude with a monocle. The New Gods, was it Vermin Wunderbar had a monocle? One of Darkseid's minions had a monocle, and so he looks a lot like that, except bald. But it's a close-up on Mindbender, and like a real extreme close-up. And in the monocle, Kirby drew these like kind of shadow looks of, it's clear to see, but it's like it's half drawn, of Freedom and Timber just attacking Mindbender, and his face is that Kirby like exasperated, like big jaw open, his eyes are, it's really cool. So we have Mindbender with the animals reflected in the monocle, and then the final panel is actually the guards jump in front of him. So you see Mindbender you see his leg, like it's like you can barely see him. You see some of his cape is drawn, like it's on the right side of the panel, so it's like you almost can't see it. But the meat of this panel is Freedom and Timber clashing with these Cobra guards. And throughout this issue, you see a lot where the artists took advantage of the whole idea of going low and going high, right? So Timber is always like kind of towards the bottom, and they frame it so that Freedom is typically attacking from above, and that's how you get both of them in the same frame without kind of colliding each other, and that's what's happening here. So you got Freedom and Timber going ham on these two Cobra guards, with a little bit of Mindbender kind of ducking out. It's awesome. I don't know if anyone ever got this page. Maybe Dave Mandel owns this page, but it's amazing. Yo, Joe! I love this artist. He was always compared to two people. And in his career, he's said his biggest influence was Jack Kirby. He was also very, very favorably compared to Neil Adams. So them putting post Kirby page, you give me John Byrne with Jerry Ordway doing the inks. I'm in, everybody. And what's awesome is Byrne must have coordinated, because Byrne also does the Kirby 4 panels. It's a style that Byrne did a lot in his Fantastic Four stuff, which was earlier in the decade. So it was probably, so at this point he was working at DC. He was coming off the Superman stuff. I think that would have been like 86, 87. Yeah, so he was still working on Superman stuff. He hadn't yet come back to do She-Hulk and things like that. I think like New Universe, because he did a lot of work on New Universe. He did like it was Starbrand. That's what he did. So like that stuff hadn't really kicked in yet, I believe. So this might have been like an exception. Again, you get people like Kurt Swann, and it sounds like the powers that be were just like, this is such an all-star issue, gotta let people play. So we get John Byrne, and Jerry Ordway's doing his inks. I love the Byrne Ordway combination. I've always enjoyed it. It's 4 panels, and Byrne is doing his best Kirby here. So there had to be some synchronization with these pages, and it works, and it's great. So you see Timber and Freedom wrestling with these Cobra soldiers. It's actually in the background of this panel. And the foreground is Mindbender pushing on like kind of like a secret door. So he's kind of pushing on the wall, and you see there's an outline that the wall's buckling, right? There's also alarms are going off. So there's whoever tripped it, or maybe Mindbender pulled it, but you see an alarm light shrieking, in the room as well. Second panel, Mindbender's pulling like a switch, right? So he's got his arm on a what do you call like a lever, like the old self-destruct lever kind of a thing. But that's what he's pulling down. So he's doing something with that, and that could be triggering the door, or triggering just a general like alarm, like call Cobra Island kind of a thing, like we've been busted kind of something. But he's pulling down on a lever as he's sliding open into this door. I don't think the lever has a lot of follow through, or maybe actually no. I think I take that back. I think that ties into something that we get in like the last couple pages. But he's pulling down this lever. Now he's like in the door, like he's like in this escape hatch, right? It's not the normal doorway. Third panel, if you guys have ever seen one of the greatest panels of Wolverine of all time, drawn by John Byrne from the Phoenix Saga, the Dark Phoenix Saga, when Wolverine had been in the Hellfire Club and he got sent like 4 stories down by Leland, Harry Leland, who made him so super heavy that his body just punched all the way through the flooring, and he ended up in the sewers, and he claws his way out of the sewers. And it was one of the very first time we've ever seen, we being comic readers, Wolverine unleashed, right? And it was you finally pushed him too far, and he like crawls out of the muck and is the sewer muck, and he looks up, and it's like the camera's above him at street level, and he's looking up at the camera, and you're like, next issue he's going to get revenge. And then sure enough, in the next issue he goes and he cuts his way through the Hellfire Club to kills all the guards and things like that. So that picture of Wolverine in the sewers, imagine that with Timber and Freedom, because that's what we got right here. It's Timber and Freedom, that same angle, the 2 guards. We might have to start a kill count for Timber and Freedom, because I think they killed those 2 guards. But they're down and they're looking at you, and it's just they both have that vibe, that Wolverine look up vibe. It's awesome. Like Byrne's referencing himself here. It's really, really smart. It's really great. And then the 4th panel, the escape door is now, it's closed, so it's got that like slam action speed to it. Doors are totally closed. Timber has hurled his shoulder into it, and Freedom's actually backpedaling, like a bird'll, like they do it with Angel a lot, actually, with the X-Men. It's funny. I think that's most people's point of reference with flying people in comic books. But so it's like where the wings are kind of W shaped, because they're like stopping his forward momentum before he hits the wall. I'm talking about Freedom. But Timber has kind of put his shoulder into the wall and bounced off of it. So that's it. A very fun John Byrne page.
Yo, Joe!
Now, I am so glad that they reached out to this man to work on this book, because it would not be a special issue of G.I. Joe if they didn't get the OG Herb Trimpy to participate in this comic book. Yes, guys, Herb Trimpy is in this book, and it's great because he does what he does best, which is a lot of narrative, scene setting, reminding us where we're at. The first panel is it's the outside view of the reptile house. So it's a big, big camera up in the sky, like big view of the whole zoo, not just the reptile house, but like the whole, you see a lot of the zoo. So it's that reset reminder that we've had a few pages of they're inside this, whatever this lab is, but they're still in the middle of a zoo, and that's perfect timing. So he's got outside you see alarms going off all over the place, right? So there's just blinking lights and everything, and things are spinning around. And he takes the time to draw. We get like 1, 2, 3. We get 3 panels here. It's a 5-panel page, and we get these 3 middle panels of all these different animals in the zoo, kind of like looking up, like waking up, right? It's so cool. So we get Herb Trimpy drawn. There's monkeys. They just look like cartoon monkeys. I don't know. I'm not saying he didn't do research. I'm just saying they look like monkeys. I'm not going to sit here and say they're exactly they're not orangutans. They kind of look like chimps, but they also just look like monkeys. I know they're not gorillas, but there's monkeys looking up. There's a pack of coyotes that are like, this gets their attention, or coyotes or wolves. I think they're coyotes because later on, I think this is meant to reference them later. But it's like a pack of, like you see the mountains that are drawn at zoos. When you go to zoos, there's packs of wolves on big mountains and things like that. And then the 4th panel is like elephants and giraffes in the, they usually have them grouped together in like the Africa exhibit, stuff like that. So you get these elephants, and behind them, there's like a row of trees, foliage, and then the giraffes' heads are sticking up. And it's funny because these giraffes are kind of like, huh? It's like they're doing a double take, So it's, again, we're imbuing human reactions to all these animals. Most likely they would be like, we don't care about anything. I'm eating my trees and blah, 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 blah. But there's a 5th bottom panel that is awesome. And we see these crocodiles. Now, I can't say that he's drawing the crocodiles overtly interested in the lights that are going, the alarms. I'm not saying that. But you know what we do see in this? We see a dude wearing a black mask, half submerged underwater, like he's like hiding underwater, and we see his eyes are open and he's staring right at the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, Crocmaster has entered the chat. Yo, Joe! So now, when I think of artists in that era of drawing like natural wildlife and nature and, in this case, animals, Mike Grell jumps right to mind. And that's what they thought too, because Mike Grell draws this next page. It's 4 panels. They're not evenly paneled out. They're kind of, they're a little more horizontal, but we see Timber and Freedom. They're still they're still in that dissection room, and we see that Freedom is he's kind of over this. The eagle is dead. The eagle that was on the dissection table, it was getting dissected. But Freedom is like kind of standing over him, examining him. Like he's taking interest in this eagle. Exactly what, I don't know. It's silent issue, and it's not crypto. But they're examining this dead eagle. And then the second panel, it's a smaller panel, and we see it's kind of that Freedom kind of turns his head, and there's another door that is part of this lab that we hadn't seen before. And on the top of it, it just says, it's kind of, it says Cobra Soar. That's all it says. So Cobra Soar, like dinosaur kind of thing, which is, it's like a little bit of a cheat. Like when they put signs in silent issues, but then sometimes you need stuff. Sometimes you need, I think if they're, so far they've gone without sound effects. I thought there were some sound effects in here, but there might be, maybe there's some later, but sometimes you need street signs. I know one of those silent issues we read definitely did a cheat with this, but sometimes you do, to just kind of drill home exactly what's happened. So whatever this Cobra Soar is, Freedom sees it with his eye. The third panel is the animals are kind of approaching it. And so we see that it's the same door, and they're kind of cautiously approaching it. And what's funny is Grell draws Freedom actually sitting on Timber. So he's literally riding him. He's kind of like all right, we're going to go so slow that I don't even want to fly. Like I want to just you and I will both approach this door because we both sense that there's something bad behind it. And in all of these, he made sure to draw a lot of lab beakers, because, and a lot of times when you have issues where there's multiple artists, you give them the directions. Say they're in a lab, there's beakers, and usually the labs don't look the same because they're not the same person drawing. I mean, that's kind of the case here. The lab changes the looks a lot. So in this case, like on this page, there's a lot more beakers because of what you get in this fourth panel. And this is wild because this came out years before the movie. My thought is someone in the movie may have seen this book and said, this is a great idea. We need to steal it for Jurassic Park, because the camera shifts and now it's kind of, you're still seeing timber and freedom, but in this fourth panel, you're seeing water in all these various beakers and stuff that's being stored, and they're all trembling. They're all doing that Jurassic Park thing where the ground's shaking and the water's trembling. So there's these concentric rings in all of the water beakers that he had drawn in all these panels. So now, we're Jurassic Park fans, so we know what that means. At the time, that would have been a huge innovation. And this is like 5 years before Jurassic Park. So I'm not saying someone saw this, but, and maybe, it was probably somewhere before Jurassic Park. Just Jurassic Park made it super popular. But that's fun. So that's this like ominous, like something's on the other side of that door. What is happening?
Yo, Joe!
And ladies and gentlemen, when I got to this page of this unreleased comic book, I praised the comic book gods. I can't say that I've read everything Walter Simonson has ever done, because he has done a lot of indie stuff. But I have read every mainstream thing he has ever done. I can't think of a mainstream book that he's worked on that I have not read. To see Walter Simonson with Bob Wyasek on inks drawing G.I. Joe is just the chef's kiss of comic books for this comic book fan. We're on page 10 already. There's 2 panels on this page. One is a 3/4 splash. The first panel is like a 1/4 wide, page wide shot. So it's just one long panel, and it's the outside of the facility, of the Arbco reptile house that we've already seen. Timber and Freedom are heading right at the camera. Timber's foot is like stretched out towards the camera. If you've ever seen Walter Simonson draw a fist, like Thor punching somebody or Superman, he always draws this like great fist where if you're looking at your own hand, put your middle finger, your FU finger, put your middle finger out a little bit, exaggerate that a little bit. Like you never would hit someone like that. You'd break your knuckle, but like put your middle finger out and then bring your, like kind of tighten up your other fingers so that it's not a flat wall. It's just like this rounded thing. That's how Simonson draws his fists, and it's dynamite. And he does that with Timber's paw. It's so great. Freedom looks great. Awesome. But they're flying at the camera. Like, in other words, whatever they saw, they're running out. And then you get a 3/4 splash page of a gigantic dinosaur, which must be that Cobrasaur that was on the label. It is a half cobra, half dinosaur. It is exactly what is promised in the name Cobrasaur. And in this splash page, it's breaking through the roof of the facility. Like it looks like it's about maybe 15 feet tall. And as it comes through that door, it like breaks it. Think of the logo in Thor 337 when Beta Ray Bill was smashing that logo. It's kind of like that. It's like got that vibe. Like this thing is so big. How could they possibly think they could contain it in this building? Maybe that's what they meant. Mindbender was pulling the lever for. Maybe he was releasing the Cobrasaur. Probably. Not having dialogue, it's hard to tell exactly what it was. It's awesome. So it's Walter Simonson drawing a dinosaur that is half cobra. And when I say half cobra, I mean from like the chest up is a cobra head. There's no arms on this thing. It's like a cobra hood, but then from like the chest down, not even the waist, like mid chest down, is like a T-Rex body, or maybe actually based on the size, maybe it's more like a raptor body. You know what I mean? But it's like that dinosaur-esque thing. And you know what's awesome on this? They're ahead of the game because there's feathers on the Cobrasaur. Not a lot, but there's some feathers on the Cobrasaur, which I think is them tying in the dissected bird, the eagle that was being dissected on the other page. I think that's part of it. So like Cobra's doing these experiments, and they're apparently cloning dinosaurs from birds, because birds, raptors, dinosaurs came from birds, and so on and so forth. Hence the name Raptor and all that stuff. So that's kind of cool that they were forward thinking on this. And so there's just the touch. They're not like fully feathered out, but just the touch of feathers on that, which is neat. And I've seen Simonson drawings of dinosaurs of the era, and he wasn't doing it. So I imagine this might have been something that Larry asked for, which is pretty cool. There's also a neat little nod to Simonson's Thor stuff, where the Cobrasaur is busting through the logo of the of the facility, harkening back to Thor 337, which is pretty great.
Yo, Joe!
Now, if you're talking Simonson drawing dinosaurs, you also got to think about one of the great artists of that era that was known for drawing. I'm not going to call Godzilla a dinosaur, but you know what I mean. He's close. Giant lizard is Art Adams, and Art Adams shows up for page 11, which is fabulous. And it's that tight Art Adams with slightly exaggerated features that just give every character of his just this kind of sweet cartoony feel. But there's so much depth to his line work and so much intricate detail to the hatching that he brings to that's to a picture, that it feels just this like a surreal living cartoon. And it's so grounded, it never feels childish. You know what I mean? And that's what, for my money, that's what Art Adams brings to the table. And having Art Adams draw this Cobrasaur is fabulous. It's great. So we get a fun kind of it's like you're down. It's like the camera's at one end of a path, right? And Timber and Freedom are running towards the camera, and the Cobrasaur is in the distance, and the Cobrasaur is chasing after them. And specifically, it has now headbutted that hot dog cart from earlier in the adventure, right? So Larry's like laying tracks, and that's what he's known for. He's known for things just don't pop up. Like he'll have someone interact with something, and I mean, good storytelling does that, but Larry specifically did that a lot in G.I. Joe. So this Cobrasaur is kind of doing that headbutt shoulder like creatures do to get stuff out of the way. This hot dog cart. And in the second panel, you have debris from that hot dog cart hitting Freedom. So that hits Freedom in midair, and it knocks him to the ground, right? So Freedom's kind of knocked out of the situation at this point. So then on this third panel, there's Art introduces a small a building, like it's actually a restroom. So like those like restrooms at amusement parks have those like little individual little huts, like it's just a building that's just a restroom. It's not a restroom inside of another building, right? So it's just a little thing. You walk in, it splits men one way, female the other way, and then like that kind of a small building. That's what he's on. So Timber, there's garbage cans and stuff that you could see where Timber has jumped up. There's a couple action lines. So Timber's now on top of that building, which is cool because that puts him eye to eye with the Cobrasaur. That's the whole point of getting him on top of that. Timber knows he has to gain some higher ground here. And in the middle of this drawing is Freedom laying on the ground, kind of rumpled up, like his wings are all drawn a little goofy. If you ever seen the X-Men draw like Angel, when he has his feather wings and his wings get messed up, every time I've seen that, I'm always like, how do those feathered wings are amazing to me. Like, how would they ever recover? And obviously it's because it's a drawing, but like in real, wings are amazing. Anyway, so Freedom's laying on the ground and he's all jacked up. The next panel is the Cobrasaur in a real Godzilla kind of style, like this real, like Godzilla, like how else to put it? The Godzilla kind of stepped on buildings. He's kind of like doing this jump up onto a building, like the game Rampage. That's what I'm thinking of. So we have Cobrasaur leaping on top of the building, like to get at Timber. And then the final panel for this Art Adams page is awesome. Timber's doing that fake out move, where as Godzilla leaps at him, Timber jumps off the roof. So now Timber is almost on the ground, and the Godzilla, the Cobrasaur, I keep saying Godzilla because it's Art Adams. The Cobrasaur has like landed and he's crashed through the roof of the building. So this building, this restroom, has completely collapsed around the Cobrasaur, like he's in the middle of it, right? And this is, kind of how they're going to get away. So Timber takes off, he leaps off. It's really a lot of fun. And it's just got this whole Godzilla attacks Tokyo vibe to it. It's great.
Yo, Joe!
And then we introduce a young up-and-comer that some of you may be familiar with. I'm trying to think of when this would have dropped. Again, because it never was released, we don't really know. This definitely would have been around the time, though, that he was being courted to draw his singular issue of G.I. Joe. And you know what I'm talking about. A young Todd McFarlane shows up. And he gives us a fabulous page. It's page 12 now. And it's great. It's great for a few reasons. One is he brings this kind of image style anthropomorphizing to their faces, which I don't love, but because he's kind of one of the only guys that are really doing it in this comic. It happens a little bit elsewhere, but for the most part, everyone's drawing the wolf like a wolf and an eagle like an eagle. Todd's really kind of cartoons him up a little bit here, and it works because he's got it. He's doing that. Todd's got like a rounded face thing, and so he's giving that kind of a face to these creatures. I don't know how else to describe. It's not like they have human faces by any stretch of the imagination, but they're alive, right? That kind of a thing. So first panel is Timber is kind of nudging at Freedom. So like an animal would like snout at something to kind of like wake up. So that's what he's doing. So he's nudging his snout on Freedom, who is just drawn on the ground. He's obviously, we know he's not dead, but he's laid out. He's unconscious. So it's kind of sad, and it's kind of like a heartbreaking kind of a picture, which is really cool. There's not a lot of atmosphere on this page in that regard. So it's not like it's not trying to pull your heart. So it's not like it's not a Spielberg movie per se, but it is just a statement of fact that here's a sad animal trying to help another sad animal. And so for that, it's tugging your heartstring. Second panel, Timber's looking over his shoulder. So now it's like kind of like where the camera is now, it's still got Freedom in panel, and Timber's looking back behind him, and so we see in the background that there's still kerfuffle happening in that building that the Cobrasaur fell through, right? So there's still like debris and smoke, and you see a tail thrashing and things like that. So the Cobrasaur can't really get up. And why? Because he has no arms. Like, it's a cobra with legs. That's, while awesome, you could see that if it falls, it's going to have trouble getting up. Think Ed 209 from the RoboCop movies, right? When Timber sees that the Cobrasaur is still, it's not out for good, he realizes he's got to get out of there. So he picks up Freedom in his mouth gently, like a pup, like you would a pup, that kind of a thing. And this is a totally fun panel, and it's prescient to McFarlane's work on Spider-Man. He draws this exaggerated Timber. It's really Spider-Man-y. So there's no webs or no anything, he's just jumping. But if you watch animals run, they'll put like both feet in sync behind them, like pulling themselves forward, and then their rear legs will go forward, right? Think how if you've watched like a leopard's run. I think leopards run like this. I don't know that wolves run like this, I gotta be honest, but that's what he's drawing here. So you've got this hunched over Timber with his four legs kind of pushing behind him, and then his rear hind legs, like the knees of his hind legs, are almost up by his shoulders, head area, because they're like, he's like propelling himself. He's got Freedom in his jaw, and I'm not joking. It's real similar to the Spider-Man web swing that he would, later draw. Spider-Man all super crouched with his hands down by his crotch and his legs way up over his head. Like that McFarlane thing, He's kind of doing it with Timber, and I'm here for it because it looks really, 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 really great. Yeah, so that's fun.
Yo, Joe!
Before Hellboy, Mike Mignola gave us a page of this silent issue of G.I. Joe. That's right, guys. Hellboy creator Mike Mignola, master of the black ink, master of shadows, master of impressionistic comic book storytelling. He gave us a page for this. It's awesome. The Mignola of this era was very much, if you've never read Cosmic Odyssey from DC, this was around that time. He was about to do Gotham by Gaslight. He had done some Hulk covers. It was very, very liney. It's still Mignola. It's still 100% his flavor. But he hadn't yet crossed over to that dark shadow, the master of the shadow, right? He hasn't yet realized how much just spotting blacks on a page will give his, will make his drawings come to life in a way that before he does it, they look more like a singular snapshot of a moment. And then when he spots those blacks, there could be anything going on in those shadows, and so it just feels like this is a brief period of time of the action that he's drawing. If that makes any sense at all, I always like in his early work to like just that, like old snapshots of things, and even the poses, literally the way he poses. You know, he's not a very fluid. His figures don't move they move quickly, but they don't move, they're not like fluid, they're not like flowing off the page. They're very stoic and very staid and posed wonderfully. And so you're getting that on this page too. You're getting that without the blacks, and the blacks add this element of mystery, but this is pre that. So this is still kind of this overexposed photo style of Mignola. It's the best way I can describe it to you without actually showing you this page. And of course I can't show you this page because I don't need to be sued out of house and home. So we get first panel is it's a smallish panel, and it's overlaying a bigger panel that's behind it. And it's Timber's still got freedom in his mouth, but you have like one ear perking up, and he's facing the camera. His left ear is perked up. His right ear is kind of down. And then that's overlaying this big, like almost, I guess it's half page, or 3/4 page even, splash page. It's not a full splash page, but it's like a frame behind. There's these smaller frames throughout this that are sitting on top of it. So this is the backdrop. And what the backdrop is a coyote paddock. And in this coyote cage, paddock, whatever, it's a little hill, little mountain, and then there's a lead coyote on the top, and then there's a whole bunch of them kind of milling around on there. Timber has come to a stop in front of it, so he actually is kind of shadowed, blacked out a little bit. But then the coyotes, they're all very, a lot of line work on them. They all have their eyes on him. It's like a big V, like an inverted V. Mignola was doing a lot of that kind of page layouts at the time, a lot of that look, and it works well. And these guys are behind the bars. They're behind the like the cage, the paddock, right? So there's bars in front of them between the two. And then there's an inset, and these are all at the bottom. So at the bottom of the page, you have 3 inset, they're overlaid, but inset images. And it's this lead coyote who's on the top of the hill, and he's howling. In the center, you've got Timber, who has now dropped freedom. He's howling back at him. And then in the third panel, you see Freedom at Timber's feet, and he's like shaking it off, like, so his wings are flapping again, and he's kind of like, there's some like head shake lines on it, right? So it's like it's kind of like this whole like primal animals are connecting to each other, and it's waking, and it's reconnecting what's going on. In other words, these animals want out. They need help. It's more than just, like those birds that called Freedom there because they knew their buddy was in trouble. Like it's more than just those birds. All these animals are in help. I think that's what's being communicated on this page.
Yo, Joe!
Who else better to communicate helping people than the recently passed but absolute legendary Neil Adams, who did more for comic book creators and helped more creators get more rights and artwork back and so on and so forth. So I know that was not in their thinking when they planned this, but I think in retrospect, I think it actually works pretty well. So Neil Adams shows up. It's great. It's a lot of fun narrative lifting. I wouldn't say there's a major Neil Adams trademark on this page, right? But he draws a great animal, and he's drawing. The first panel is Freedom has now flown up. So Freedom's got his wind back, and he's taken out a sign. It looks like this ice cream sign or something. And he knocks, and it's knocked over, and it's fallen between between the fence of the paddock and where the coyotes live, right? So it's basically, he's made a land bridge. So now all these coyotes can escape. And in this, you could see that they're starting to run out over the sign. So there's one coyote already halfway through over the sign. Freedom's flying above in his, there's action lines around his wings and stuff. And then the other coyotes are filing, following him out. I have a feeling that ice cream was supposed to be in the other page with Mignola. If you look back, there's an image, there's like a shape that I think was supposed to be the sign that Freedom knocks over, but it wasn't really fully drawn. And, here's the thing. When you're doing a jam book like this, there's so many things that if you get them to line up and look proper and from artist to artist, you are so blessed. So in this case, I think there was a miscommunication. I think that ice cream thing was supposed to be in the other panel. Anyway, so they're filing out. This next panel is kind of an overhead shot of the park, and not an overhead, but it's like a 40 degree up in the air. So there's a couple wolves running towards the camera, but then you see a lot of paths throughout the park, and coyotes. And you see a bunch of these coyotes running all over these paths, right? That tells me they're not running to escape because they're not all going in the same direction. And sure enough, you get these, he's drawn these close-ups of, which is crazy. It's funny. All these coyote paws, they're opening latch doors. They're pushing buttons. They're pulling levers, right? They're like, they're hitting every button that they've ever seen pulled and hit and whatever all over the zoo, right? So this is the big jailbreak that's happening. And in this final panel, you get Timber and this head coyote still at the paddock chilling, and they're like howling together. So they've become buddies, right? So they're assuming they're communicating to the rest of the animals, probably even in the whole park, not just the other coyotes that are running around. So it's like Neil drew the jailbreak page, which is fun.
Yo, Joe!
This next artist, I am a big fan of. He's somebody that just doesn't get enough due when people talk about amazing legends of comic book art. Gil Kane, everybody. Gil Kane, one of the preeminent costume designers of all of superhero history. I think Dave Cockrum. They knew how to make a costume and simplify it so that it popped and it worked in any situation. His design of the Green Lantern costume will never be beaten. The Green Lanterns, the concept of the Green Lantern costume is wonderful in that each Green Lantern can modify it a little bit, so it's more their personality on all this stuff, and that's great. I have yet to see a singular look of any modified Green Lantern costume that looks better than Gil Kane's version. And I do mean the version that he modified once he added the longer sleeves, the longer shoulder pads, so that the green goes over the shoulder instead of stopping right at the end of the clavicle. That original version of the Green Lantern costume is so good. It has yet to be topped. And this is a guy who absolutely loves Guy Gardner's outfit. It's still not better than Hal's original outfit. All the versions of John Stewart's outfit, they look great. Nothing has beaten that Gil Kane outfit. It's so good. And at this point in time, Gil was working on the Atom, Atom, for DC Comics. He was doing like a lot of the Power of the Atom stuff. And one of the really cool hallmarks of that Atom series is he had a shrunk down. The thing with the Atom series for that in that early 80s was that the Atom, Ray Palmer, got stuck at a small size, and he was living in this like small colony. I think it was set in South America, if memory serves, of like small people. And so he would ride a frog. I think the frog's name was Puddle Jump. That's in my brain for some reason. He gave it a fun name, but it was like this barbarian sword and sorcery thing. They picked the right guy for this because this page has 3 panels. The first panel is it's over the shoulder of the Cobrasaur, right? So we don't see the Cobrasaur yet, but you see the scale, so you could tell that it's, that's what you're looking at. And in what the image is focusing on is Timber and this lead coyote. So he's like menacing towards them, and they're a ways off. They're like 100 yards away or 50 yards away or something like that. So it's not like he's not like over their shoulder yet, but you see that, oh no, the threat is returning. The second panel is like a half page, but it's right in the middle of the page. It looks so good, and this is where I bring up the Atom. Much like Ray Palmer would ride this frog, or you got the Cobrasaur, and he is now being ridden by none other than our friend Crocmaster. We teased him early on. He got teased by showing up when they showed all the animals in the zoo. Larry did not forget. Crocmaster is here, and he is now riding the Cobrasaur, very much like Ray Palmer rode the frogs and the creatures in the Power of the Atom series. We also have, this is a cool moment because it's not just the Cobrasaur now. So apparently Crocmaster showed up with some reserves. You got the Cobrasaur. He's got his crocodiles. There's at least 2 of his crocodiles there. We also have a giant boar. So that's got to be Naugahyde's boar. And there's a huge mutated scorpion, which is eventually going to be the desert scorpion guy, right? And they were doing experiments here. So is this where the giant mutated scorpion comes from? And in the sky, we have a bunch of raptors that, they've got like the headband little feather thing tying off their head. So it's like how they would draw raptors. I asked on Twitter if we ever named raptors, and I don't think they ever got names. Like Polly, Junkyard, things like that. So there's birds of prey in the sky, and Voltar's vulture, not to be left out, is also here, except he's a vulture. So smartly, and I wonder if this was Larry or if this was Gil drawing, like making the choice to do this, which either you include it, but because it's a vulture, he's sitting in the background. There's a tree in the back that he's perched on. He's not attacking. He's going to pick over the bones of whoever loses. I love that little moment there. It's really, really cool. Then there's a final panel, and you were back to being over the shoulder now. And now this giant shadow of the Cobrasaur is looming over Timber and this coyote. They've noticed it, right? So both of their heads are turned towards it. And it's one of those moments of like, oh boy.
Yo, Joe!
If you're going to have a page like this that I'm looking at right now, which is amazing, you're going to ask one person to do it. And it's going to be George Perez. And it's going to be amazing. You guys remember that cover of Crisis where all the villains were on the cover screaming at you? Do you guys remember that cover of Avengers where all the Avengers were on the cover screaming at you? Well, here's a page of G.I. Joe drawn by George Perez with every animal in the zoo screaming at you. I love everything about this page. I love that there's no narrative excuse for it. We don't see the lead up to it. We don't see all the animals one by one joining together. It's just a straight shot of every good guy animal that you go back 2 pages and all those coyotes were freeing all the animals around the zoo. This is the result of it. There's an elephant, there's giraffe, there's monkeys, there's orangutans, a gorilla that looks like it looks like a hedgehog. And it also looks like there's a giant lion, a huge lion. There's a leopard. I think that's a cheetah, which is there's got to be a cheetah because George Perez, crushed the cheetah over in Wonder Woman. So there's the cheetah, and what's really cool is he put that cheetah in this kind of the same place that he drew the cheetah on that cover to Crisis. So this is totally an homage to that. A hyena. And strangely enough, the hyena's in the same place as the Joker. Like he knew what he was doing. He was playing with it. And right in the middle is Timber and Freedom. And they're next to Timber is that other coyote, and some of the other coyotes are also peppered throughout. But it's really kind of a Noah's Ark thing of, it's not like there's 15 elephants and 15 gorillas, and it's like one gorilla, a couple monkey, a couple chimps, or well, a couple like small monkeys, and then there's like one chimpanzee, and there's one, you know what I mean? It's like that. So representational of they gotta let everybody go, and it's great. And they're coming right at the camera being the cobras, and they're just charging at them, and it's everything you would want in this page from the late great George Perez, an absolute master. And this page is 100% worth the cost of admission.
Yo, Joe!
Now you've got to do a fight scene, and you've just given me the most detailed, splash page you're ever going to get from any artist ever in comic books. So what you do in 1987-ish, 88, 87-ish, is you turn to someone who was recently put together one of the most exciting miniseries of all time and runs and Daredevil of all time, who had not yet branched out into the Sin Cities of the world, and even his style wasn't yet Sin City. You go to Frank Miller, inks by Joe Rubinstein. It's very much the Wolverine style, but this version that he's the way he's drawing here is very much like the Wolverine, his Wolverine pencils, and it's cool. It's a really cool layout. So picture 4 widescreen panels. So 4 panels stacked on top of each other, all same size. And imagine if you had this cobra dinosaur, this Cobrasaur, cutting across all 4 panels. He's a little bit of his head's in the top one. A lot of his face is in the middle one. His chest body is in the third one down. And then you see his legs on the bottom. But it's not a complete one-to-one. The reason there's the gutters and the space between the panels is to actually stagger it so that he's actually bigger than what's being drawn here. But you're capturing these moments, and all these animals are attacking each other. Cobras, Joes are coming from the right, cobras are coming from the left, but they're all at different stages on this page. So in this top panel, where you see a little bit of that Cobrasaur head, you've got the majority of the panel on the left side are these raptors, and they're flying at Freedom. And Freedom's, he's in this like this fighting pose on the far right side, right? So your eyes are on the far right in this top panel. Second panel, really kind of in the center, is the head of the Cobrasaur, and all the monkeys are attacking the head. So there's a giant gorilla punching the face of a giant cobra soar. There's the small monkeys are like hanging on him, and then you see a chimpanzee kind of like getting in on the action too, and there's an elephant snout that has worked its way in. I don't know what the snout is doing, but I love that it's being included, saying that the elephants aren't going to let this take this laying down. There's a snout getting thrown in here. The third panel is Crocmaster, and he was riding the back of him, so he's kind of on the left hand side of the third panel. And Timber, all stretched out, takes up most of the panel, and he's taking out Crocmaster. So Crocmaster's actually getting knocked off the back of this Cobrasaur at that time. So picture this the action here, going from that top right to the center, now to the left, and now it takes you back to the right, because we're gonna be turning the page here, and kind of in the center of this bottom panel, that coyote and a freaking lion, they're going at it head to head with that wild boar, which I'm assuming is Naugahyde's boar, and that giant scorpion. So they're going at it there, like they're squaring off there. It's really a cool page. I wish you guys could see this, but it's very reminiscent of like the Wolverine Silver Samurai fights, the Wolverine O-Gun fights.
Yo, Joe!
So this page is one for the books, because it's done by an absolute Army comic legend. Joe Kubert drew page, what is this, 18, and his sons inked it. Now, Andy and Adam have since gone on to become absolute top tier pencilers in their own right. They're huge. They're big names, right? When they work on projects, their styles are great. But at the time, if you recall, they were either doing inking or they were doing lettering. Actually, they came up through their dad's school. They were certainly have been instructors at their dad's school, but they learned at their dad's knee, and they came up through working their way up. They weren't just given these plush assignments, right? Because their last names are Kubert. So they really started out in the trenches doing lettering and stuff like that. So to have them doing the inks on their dad's work on a military book It's awesome. This whole page is really, really, really like something out of Sergeant Rock. In fact, what's absolutely funny about this page, if you really look at it and look at all the backgrounds and kind of the detail that he puts in here, this doesn't take place at a zoo. It doesn't. There's no, this page alone, there's no markings on this page that tells you you're actually at a zoo. You're not in any of the scenarios that we've been seeing for the last 17 pages. There's great action and it's awesome, but it could easily be taking place in like a Sergeant Rock desert. And I'm 100% fine with that. Kubert is a master of this stuff, and he does those like atmospheric, like desert scapes as as the backdrops for the human action of the war, and that's what he's doing here, but with animals. So the first panel is you get Timber and Crocmaster, so it's kind of following that action. They're on the ground now. You actually see a little bit of the Cobrasaur's tail in the background, and that's as much background like grounding as you're going to get. But they're on the ground. Timber's actually, or Crocmaster has the advantage on him, and he's punching Timber in the face. So it's kind of funny. You're watching a grown man punch a wolf. Second panel is Timber like checking himself. So it's like getting that second wind, and drawn by Joe Kubert. If you ever looked at his war stuff, man, when like he'd draw like Sergeant Rock, like get punched in the face or beaten up, or or someone like gets stabbed or some bandaged up like that, there was a way that he, like, there was always a haunted look in there. He gives that to Timber here. So like Timber has this been through the fight look, like he's got a little puffy eye, he's bleeding out of the mouth kind of a thing. He's a wolf, but he makes it happen, and he's got that look in this panel. And then smartly in the next panel, he jumps from that fight. He goes and he checks in on Freedom and the birds. And Freedom's getting, it's kind of an overhead shot. Freedom's getting surrounded by these other raptors. Like he's got nowhere to go. And then in the next panel, you see Freedom kind of move his wings in like a slice motion. And it's real fast. And all of a sudden his wings are shaped like, it's like when in a few years from now, when Simonson would draw Archangel throwing his metal wings, like as the Angel of Death kind of thing. That's what's happening. Like it's kind of like Freedom brought his wings forward, and it looks like he sliced their necks, which is brutal, but like really war-y, right? It's really like like war is hell kind of stuff. I don't know if birds would fight that way, but you know what? Joe Kubert bird does, and it's great. And then this final panel is this real dusty, again, there's all this dust, like literally sand dust being drawn. They're in a zoo. This wasn't there, but I love it. I'm here for it. It's like the shadowy shot of Timber. He's standing on top of Crocmaster, who's now just been beaten. And then in the like over his head, you see Freedom flying solo. So it's like Freedom won his fight kind of a thing. I love that they didn't show Timber actually beating Croc. They just showed him get his wits together, and then we know he beat him. And however he beat him, whether he ripped his throat out and murdered him or whatever, we're going to leave that to your imagination. And you just have him standing triumphant over Killer Croc's unconscious body. It's really good.
Yo, Joe!
So now, style-wise, it shifts a lot, because now it shifts to the super talented, the mega talented Jim Starlin shows up, everybody. And this is Jim Starlin, who created Thanos, and he did the whole Infinity Gauntlet saga, massive runs on Adam Warlock and things like that. What's he bringing to a G.I. Joe thing? Well, what he's bringing is the focus here shifts from these like animal fights, these like savage, murderous animal fights, to this building, an adjacent building. It might meant to be the reptile house from earlier. I'm not exactly sure, but it's just this adjacent building. The roof has popped open. Openings are drawn very much to resemble like pterodromes, like that shape of. So it's like it really is like a pterodrome. Roof has popped open, and that's in the distance. But when that happens, you see all the the few animals like he draws timber and he draws freedom, and then there's a monkey who's also looking that way. That's funny, but they all kind of turn their head, right, because it must be making this massive noise. And we see why in the second panel a fire bat launches up. So now the camera's kind of in the same place, but it's pushed a little closer, and we see that a cobra fire bat is launching out of it. So it's really like a terror drum, really. And the fire bat's kind of halfway through the silo. There's a lot of exhaust and everything. Fire bat looks good, but we also see that there's a whole flock of birds. I'm assuming these are supposed to be the same flock from the beginning that were kind of signaling freedom, that there was bad stuff going down. They're now completely like circling this fire bat, and they're like rummaging around it. So it's like, what's happening there? Third panel, the camera's now inside the cockpit, and you can see out the cockpit, and outside the cockpit you see it's like where the animals are. You see like there's the elephant drawn, things like that. So it's very loose, so it just gives you a feel of placement. But the cockpit itself is really detailed, and it's Dr. Mindbender as drawn by Jim Starlin, which is so good. So he's got like you could imagine his exaggerated solar plexus. But Mindbender is totally beaten up. He's scratched. He's got gashes, and they look like bird scratches all over him. There's feathers flying around like this cockpit. Like he's been attacked. He's absolutely been attacked by birds this whole time while he was trying to get away. It's really funny, and a really detailed drawing of a man who has been completely assaulted by birds. It's like a Hitchcock wet dream. And in the fourth panel here, we actually go back to the animals. This is it's like the camera's kind of on the ground. You see this elephant standing on top of this defeated cobrasaur. His tusk is up in the air, is kind of like celebrating. In the distance, in like the mid-ground, the gates to the zoo have been bust open, and primarily you can make out that the giraffe is running wild. So I don't know if the giraffe did anything to help the fight, but he is now free. So the giraffe is running wild. All the animals are escaping, and the elephant has conquered the cobrasaur. And beyond that, you see the contrails of the fire bat, and the contrails aren't going in a straight line. They're like turning. You know what I mean? Like they're like going in a circle, implying that Mindbender is having a really hard time piloting because he's probably still getting attacked by these birds that were not happy with him from the start of the adventure. So it's fun. Like, this victory is over. We've won. The zoo is free. Everyone, let's go run the streets. Let's party. We've beaten the giant monster.
Yo, Joe!
We've got 3 panels. They're fabulous. Absolutely fabulous panels. And they're drawn by none other than the legend himself, Bill Sienkiewicz. He would have been done doing New Mutants. He would have already done Moon Knight. He would have been probably working on some Elektra stuff in this era, I think. Absolutely master, an absolute master. This is actually the one page that really I lament that there's no coloring on this, because I'm assuming he did this. He painted this. I'm assuming, because his work, the colors mean so much to his work. And he's got such an impressionistic style. And the pages on this, I'm assuming the colors on this page would be absolutely gorgeous. So it's neat. So the first panel is it's Timber and Freedom. They're running through town, but the town kind of comes to a half stop. So it's almost like representation of a town, right? So half this frame is a city street, and then the houses just stop, and you see that this road goes off into the desert. So it's kind of saying, and Timber and Freedom are running to freedom. They're getting away from the zoo and the town and all that stuff. And the Coyote's with them too, which is kind of neat. Second panel is now they're 100% in the desert, and the sun is setting over the buttes and all that stuff. And all 3 of them are running free, very, very homeward bound. Very, think all that stuff. Gorgeous. It's a really, really, really pretty drawing. And then the third panel, it's a little larger. It takes up more of the page. It's those 3 approaching the Quonset huts. Now the sun's totally down now, so it's nighttime, and the lights are the actual electricity lights are on, and they're throwing the light source. So there's a lot of heavy inks, a lot of shadows here. It looks so good. His version of Spirit is amazing. If you've ever read his New Mutant stuff, his work with Danny Moonstar and Native Americans, like he's in the Demon Bear and all that stuff, like it's just one drawing of Spirit, but it's there. Like it's just this, there's a real authenticity to the way he's drawing Spirit here. It's really, really cool. And Spirit is sitting outside as if he's waiting for his best friend to come back to the hut. It's just absolutely a stunning page.
Yo, Joe!
So now page 21 is drawn by someone who does not done a lot of comic book work, but the very little comic book work that he has done has been amongst the greatest works of comic art we've ever seen. He did Born Again. He did Batman Year One. He is David Mazzucchelli, and he draws this page like it was going out of style, is how good this page is. It's everyone. The lines are so smooth. They're so human. There's just a gentleness to this page. It's just wonderful. First panel, it's Spirit welcoming his best friend. He's got his left arm up, and Freedom is like landing already on it, kind of half land. I think looks like one of his legs are half up, and Spirit's kind of looking at him, like giving him a where have you been kind of a thing. Timber and this coyote are sitting on the ground, like patiently sitting, like dogs would sit, kind of a thing. So they're just sitting on the ground in front of Spirit. Second panel, from the door of the Quonset hut, is Snake Eyes. Now it's darkness, right? It's nighttime, so there's a lot of shadow here. It looks really smooth. As good as Mazzucchelli drew Batman and he drew Daredevil, imagine his Snake Eyes. It is minimalist, but powerful. All the inks, all the blacks are in the right places. He's given just the right, especially because it's nighttime and he's stepping out of the shadow kind of into the light. Like the light plays off his like black costume. It just looks so good. It's the visored Snake Eyes, like the V2 version, in my opinion, the best version. Wah, wah. And Timber is greeting him, right? So Timber's like on his on his hind legs with his forelegs up, and Snake Eyes is giving him a hug. So it's all good. So it's like no one's getting scolded for being gone all day, kind of a thing. And then there's this panel, which is crazily enough, where this ties in to the big crossover. So there's a panel of this coyote still sitting, chilling, patiently, kind of trained, and you see the Quonset hut in the picture. So it's not just randomly happening. And out the door of the Quonset hut, a 1959 Peugeot is driving past, and in the passenger seat is Columbo's dog. It's Columbo leaving from the adventure that he had on the animated episode that this would have been the crossover with. So Columbo has just solved the murder, and it's time to leave. And he's driving out of the pit in his 1959 Peugeot. And so we see this coyote kind of be like, oh, there's a dog in that car. It's like, it's great. It's this awesome. You never see Columbo though. He's totally obscured, but you do clearly see the Basset Hound dog in the passenger side. It's great. There's a fourth panel here, and this is the camera's kind of gone. Picture like the camera's almost inside the hut now, and there's a communicator, like a phone. So Spirit's picking up a communicator, and you see Spirit talking into this communicator from the like wired into the pit. Over his shoulder in kind of the mid is this coyote, and then in the distance you see the Peugeot driving away, so we get one last shot of the Peugeot. And then there's this nice panel, and it's actually kind of brackets the page, so it really cuts diagonally with the first panel of that Mazzucchelli drew of Spirit in the top left. This is now in the bottom right, so it really makes a nice little line for the page. It works well. Of Dusty emerging from the same entrance that everyone else was emerging from outside.
Yo, Joe!
And you know what that means, guys. If Dusty's there, this must be the origin of Sandstorm. Are you kidding me? We get this whole big Sandstorm reveal, and no names because it's a silent issue, but this is the origin of Sandstorm. So now there's this wonderful page, and this is actually a heartwarming page because it's drawn by Jazzy John Romita Sr. and inked by John Romita Jr. So you have another father-son duo joining forces to make this page happen. And who draws heartfelt, emotional moments in the Marvel style more than John Romita Sr.? Stop it. So we got there's a great panel, and it's Dusty kind of like, he's standing in front of Sandstorm, and he's kind of eyeing him, like he's like giving him the old, the old once over. And then there's another panel where the next panel is Dusty's now it's a side, like the cameras are switched to the side. Dusty has kneeled so that he's at eye level with Sandstorm. It's kind of, they're kind of giving each other the once over. It's really fun. And then this third panel, Sandstorm is the first one to put the paw out. So Sandstorm put his paw out to say, hello, friend. And then in the fourth panel, Dusty puts his hand out and he shakes it, and they shake paws. It's amazing. And then those two are mid-page down, and so you end with the final panel, this whole episode, this whole book, this strangely emotional, amazing book, is this nice, long, widescreen panel of all six G.I. Joe members entering the pit, entering the hut. Freedom, so it's their back, right? So it's Freedom's on Spirit's left arm, and he's holding him up. So it's Freedom, then Spirit, and then on Spirit's right is Snake Eyes, and it's the back of Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes, they're both walking directly inside, and on Snake Eyes' right is Timber. Snake Eyes he has one hand like over Timber, like, kind of petting him. To Timber's right is Sandstorm, and he's looking up. So everyone else is looking forward. Sandstorm's looking up. And Dusty, who is on Sandstorm's right, so on the full right side of the panel, Dusty is walking in, and he's actually looking down at Sandstorm. It's like love at first sight for like human pet moment. Like it's like a meet cute for Dusty and Sandstorm. And it's just this acting, this Romita, like the ability to just put that acting moment. You could have drawn them all walking in. You could have, be in a badass moment. But you throw in that those two are still locked eyes and becoming friends. Man, it adds this resonance to this last page. It's awesome. It's so much like the written by Larry. So it's really reminiscent of like the last page reveal of, oh my gosh, they're Arishikage brothers. Well, no, on this last page reveal, we revealed that this whole time this was the secret origin of Sandstorm. This was how Sandstorm and Dusty met, and he joined the G.I. Joe team. Guys, I can't tell you how amazing it was to get this comic book sent to me by my anonymous source. This has been such a treat. I hope you've enjoyed my descriptions. I hope I've described them well enough. I can't show them to you on social media because if I do, I will be sued to the gills. Maybe if we meet in person, and maybe if I go on like LegalZoom and whip up some NDA, I can show you these files because I do not want to get in trouble. But it is an amazing set of 22 pages of G.I. Joe artwork. I hope that I did it justice in describing it to you guys. I hope I painted a beautiful picture by these wonderful artists. And that cover, stop it. This has been a delight. Who knows what's next? But that's it for Silent in the Zoo. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.